to the shoulder, making sure his bevels are even on both sides or this blade will just curve. Arthurian legends and stories have been told 100 different ways, and Excalibur comes in a ton of different forms. In this case, it's a beautiful two-handed longsword with a ton of engraving that's going to happen in this panel that I drew with a Sharpie up here. I don't want to go anywhere near that when I'm grinding. I'm going to just bring that edge up and taper it in right here and here. But first, I'm going to grind in the fuller. Here's a tip for anybody out there trying to make swords themselves. Anytime you're going to hand grind a fuller in, do it before you grind your edges. That way when you grind your edges, you can taper that fuller all the way to the point like I'm gonna do, or just fix it if it wanders a little bit. So that's where I'm gonna start. I'm gonna go to the 2-inch wheel, and I'm gonna strike in my fuller all the way down the center, then lay in my edges, and by doing that, I'll be able to taper that fuller narrower and narrower as we get closer to the point.
The plates for Excalibur's guard are ready. One is already set in pitch. This is going to be the overlay plate that goes like this. And on this back plate that is already set in pitch, there's not much engraving, but every little bit, as you will see in the end, contributes to the whole. I'm going to be doing bright cut engraving, and it will have a little bit background texture, but not much. You usually see me doing Eastern and Japanese engraving, and this is closer to Western European, as well as picked up by the American School of Engraving. However, I still use my old trusty tools. I'm going to be mostly using this hammer. Now that I'm done engraving the bottom plate, it's time to pry it off and start with the top plate.
So I have most of this blade run all the way through the grits. I just have to do the one side here on the fuller and then clean up the flats afterwards. Normally you see us polish a blade after heat treating. In this case it has to be before because this fuller has some engraving in it. Also the flat down here has to be nice and clean so Ilya can engrave the dragons. I'm gonna go diagonally on this soft larger wheel. You saw me strike that fuller in with a 2-inch wheel, but this wheel is nice and soft and I'll be able to just kind of go at an angle and really jam in and push in and force that sanding belt to the shape of my fuller, and it'll polish it out all the way down. I'll change my angles a little bit and then I'll finish up the polish on the Scotch-Brite wheel.
Matt has ground the blade and brought it to a medium polish. I don't want the polish too high, otherwise the light will shine in my eyes, preventing me from seeing my design and mess with my depth. First I have to apply the basic sketch to the surface. Then I'm going to be refining the pattern as I'm getting deeper and deeper into my cuts. I'm going to start first with the design that depicts the dragon breathing fire onto the anvil, and once that side of the blade is done, I'm going to flip the blade over and start on the design that depicts two dragons locked in combat.
According to King of Avalon lore, the blade of Excalibur was hardened using dragon's fire, and that part of the story is emulated on the rear engraving that depicts a dragon raining fire down on the blacksmith's anvil. I'm going to be turning the basic form for the pommel on this sword. We're going to do this all in one piece. I've got some free machining steel here. I'm going to take it down to 1 3/4 inch. There's also a gemstone mounted in the top. I've got a fairly large piece of rutilated quartz. We're going to cut in here. We've got to cut to the size of the stone because we're not going to recut the stone. So we've got a full inch here. And then after all this engraving is done, I'll cut a small series of cuts on the bottom of these prongs. They'll be bent in and they'll grab around the stone. As a boy, to save his own life from sacrifice by his king, Merlin foretold his kingdom's fate by interpreting the meaning of an epic battle between two dragons. This battle is represented by the two entangled dragons on the front engraving. Got the artwork that Ilya's working from. This is the basic layout for the sword guard. He's taken some silver coins that we've purchased. This is what he's going to engrave from. So the dragon is going to be engraved here in the center. We're going to create this entire thing in free machining steel that's going to allow us to do this detent work around the outside just with a chisel. We'll work it out. We're going to cut into it for an inside diameter that's going to hold this silver coin. And then I'll be able to go in with a boring bar and increase the size of that until my coin fits.
For the central medallion that goes in the middle of the guard, I flattened out the piece of coin silver, but only on the edges, never touching the center. You can still see part of the logo right here. The center dragon, after it's finished, will go right here and will be captured with the bezel that Carrie's working on right now. Now I'm going to proceed drawing out my dragon design and inscribing it. The technique I'm going to use is going to be a combination of engraving and uchidachi. The reason for that is I need to produce the maximum depth out of this coin. And the depth has to work very well together with the depth I achieve on the blade engraving. I'm going to use a tool known as a liner. And what it does is just pushes the material back, creating a crease. After the liner, a simple flat bottom chisel. As you notice, I'm working from the outside in. What I'm doing is creating a wave and gathering some material as well as pitch at the bottom of the coin up to the center, creating more height.
You're going to notice that Ilya is going to anneal the central medallion several times during this process for two different reasons. One, softer metal is easier to move around, and two, we don't want it to crack after it gets work hardened when Ilya is hammering on it. To anneal silver, you just heat it up and quench it in water, the opposite of what you want to do with steel. Ilya uses a heat gun to heat up the pitch and removes the medallion.
For the guard on this sword, Ilya is going to start with 1018 steel. It's 1 inch square. He's going to get his length, and then he's going to go to the iron kiss to create the form.
Okay, so I engraved exactly 1/4 of the cross guard for the sword. I have to do it once again right here, symmetrically, and then twice more on the obverse side. So I have to do it 3 more times. And you can see already how the silver is a different color than the steel. Silver is naturally warm in its reflection, and then steel is naturally cold.
I've used blue tape to protect the engraving while I've got this on the mill. I've marked out how the tang is going to sit, measured the thickness of the blade, measured the size of my cutter.